Hey again, it's Mr. Shrum, and I am back to finish the Cycles and Ecosystems tutorial. And where we left off was the nitrogen, water, and carbon cycles. So we will look at those today. All three of these are required for life. Carbon is an atom found in all living things. Nitrogen is a part of DNA and other biological functions. Water makes up part of the cytoplasm of cells and allows for efficient transfer of vital substances. And these things are always cycling through Earth. The glass of water you drank this morning has likely been cycling through Earth for billions of years. And that's a pretty cool thought, right? You're drinking billions of years old worth of material, if you really think about it. So let's dive into how water, carbon, and nitrogen move and change. All right, so I'm sure you are all familiar with the water cycle by now. It's the continuous movement of water on and around Earth. The mass of water on Earth is almost always constant. So it's the same amount of water, just changing forms continuously. Water keeps moving from one place to another through a series of processes that form the water cycle. And during the cycle, it keeps changing state from solid to liquid to gas. So here we have, right, so water, a body of water, it evaporates. That forms clouds in a gas state. And then we have happy little fluffy clouds, like white clouds. And then the gaseous water starts to turn to liquid. And then we see either dark clouds, and that becomes so heavy that the water falls in the form of rain or snow. That leads back to where we started, water. So liquid to gas, back to liquid and or solid, and then back to liquid again. Yeah, and you're familiar with that if you've grown up at all. Water's always doing this stuff. And the main driver of this is the sun. The heat from the sun causes evaporation, other weather, and storms. And we can click on each label and learn about the stage. So I'll start with groundwater. Melting snow and rain seep into the soil. This process is called infiltration. The infiltrated water either joins a stream or sinks deeper into the soil to form groundwater. This water saturates every rock and water pocket that exists below Earth's surface. Some groundwater may also emerge as springs. Little springs. Evaporation from oceans, lakes, and streams. So here we have the sun heating up the water. This causes it to change into water vapor and evaporate into the atmosphere. Also, some ice and snow change directly into water, and this is known as sublimation. Or it changes without melting into water. So it's going from solid to gas immediately, and that's sublimation. here we have something that has not come up before, transpiration. Some water evaporates from plant leaves, just from plant leaves, it just evaporates into the air. And that's known as transpiration. But the main thing we're talking about is condensation. Water vapor rises up in the air, where lower temperatures condense the vapor into tiny water droplets, forming clouds. So the vapor rises up, hits colder air, and then forms these clouds. And when the water vapor condenses, the water droplets in the air grow heavier and heavier to the point they fall from the clouds. And these droplets can form snow, sleet, rain, or even hail. And then lastly, we have surface runoff. So as snow melts or rain falls on the ground, water flows down mountains and hills to form or join streams and rivers. So we call that surface runoff. Living organisms, even humans, contribute to this cycle. We drink water that's needed for biological processes and then excrete most of it in the form of urine. Some water is released in the form of water vapor when we exhale air. And when we sweat, we're excreting some water. And then that water evaporates from our skin and into the air. This water moves and changes form along with all other water in the water cycle. Moving on to the next cycle, nitrogen. Here we have the atomic symbol for nitrogen, a big N, and the number and its weight, mass, atomic. It's essential for life. It's an important component of all proteins and of DNA. It's also a component of chlorophyll, which is what plants need to complete photosynthesis. They need this green chlorophyll pigment. And we know it's the most prevalent gas in the atmosphere, but living organisms can't use the nitrogen directly in the air. It needs to be changed into another form for them to consume it. And this fixing of nitrogen for other uses is through this nitrogen cycle. So for us to use nitrogen, and for everything else to use nitrogen, it needs to be changed into another form. So let's see. We'll click here. Bacteria play an important role in the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen, denoted by here, N2, into ammonia, NH3. So ammonification. Bacteria called decomposers break down the waste products of plants and animals to produce nitrogen and then return it to the soil. Decomposers also break down dead plants and animals to release ammonia. Nitrification. Nitrifying bacteria convert this ammonia into nitrogen and oxygen containing compounds, nitrites, and nitrates. This process is called nitrification. here we start out with N2, right? And then we have nitrogen fixing bacteria, changing it into ammonia. Decomposers also break down waste products and release ammonia. Then we have nitrification, converting ammonia into nitrogen and oxygen. Sorry about that. My dog is barking at something. Assimilation. So we have nitrification. Nitrifying bacteria convert ammonia into nitrogen and oxygen containing compounds. Then we have assimilation. Plants absorb nitrogen compounds from the soil to make proteins. Animals consume these plants to make their own proteins. And then we have denitrification. Denitrifying bacteria break down nitrates to form nitrogen gas, which returns to the atmosphere. So you see that things aren't completely converted into one form or another. We have nitrogen gas converted into ammonia and then converted into nitrogen and oxygen containing compounds known as nitrates and nitrites. And then the plants absorb nitrogen compounds from the soil, make their proteins, and then the animals eat those plants and they're able to make their proteins. And then the remaining nitrates and nitrites are turned back into nitrogen gas. And adaptation is a characteristic. Let's see if it loads. Is a characteristic or behavior that helps an organism survive. You're given a video about how the sundew plant survives. So use evidence from the video to explain the adaptation. And lastly, we have the carbon cycle. Now that we've explored both the water and nitrogen cycles, we have the important carbon cycle. Carbon is a part of every living thing. Organic molecules such as carbohydrates, protein, and fats have carbon and hydrogen bonds. It's always on the move and it's constantly recycled through this cycle. Recycled through this. That's a lot of cycling. It exists in all spheres and is also moving between the spheres as well. So here we're given a visual. Let's start at the top. Interaction between atmosphere and hydrosphere. Oceans and other bodies of water take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Similarly, aquatic organisms excrete carbon dioxide, which enters the atmosphere. Interaction between atmosphere and biosphere. CO2 is one of the trace gases that make up the atmosphere. Plants use this CO2 in the atmosphere for photosynthesis. Animals acquire this carbon by eating the plants, and then they release CO2 back into the atmosphere when they respirate or breathe. interaction between biosphere and geosphere. So organism waste contains carbon, and that can enter the geosphere. So when plants and animals die, they decay, and carbon enters the soil as well. Dead plants and animals are buried deep underground over time. And when they're under a lot of pressure for a very long period of time, think millions of years, they may turn into fossil fuels such as oil and natural gas. And then we have the interaction between geosphere and atmosphere. When people burn fossil fuels such as coal, natural gas, and oil to heat their homes, power our cars, and run factories, they release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So we just discussed how burning fossil fuels releases CO2 in the atmosphere. It's a greenhouse gas, if you remember. It keeps Earth warm and sustainable, but the fact that CO2 has increased at a very alarming rate, more heat is being trapped in the atmosphere, causing the Earth to be warmer than usual. And this is known as climate change. With increased CO2 levels in the atmosphere, oceans are also absorbing more CO2. And as an acidic compound, CO2 is changing the pH levels of the oceans. And this is the measurement of acidity. A shift in pH of ocean water can severely hamper the growth and reproduction of marine animals. So climate change can make the oceans more acidic and thus change the way organisms are able to survive. But here we're given an activity focusing on photosynthesis. Photosynthesis in plants is the process of transforming radiant energy from the sun into glucose. This process takes place in the chloroplasts within cells. Cellular respiration involves using glucose from photosynthesis to make ATP, which is a form of energy used for plants' basic life processes. Cellular respiration takes place in mitochondria. So in this first diagram, it shows you the cycle of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And then we have the carbon cycle down here. But here we show, we're given how photosynthesis technically transforms. We have the chloroplast. And you're just going to look at these diagrams. And here is one example. I'll let you look at that. And then you're given questions. Asking about your model. And do you think plants influence the water and nitrogen cycles? You're asked about deforestation. And then self-evaluate. So we have the summary video. And that's it for today. So I hope you learned a bit about cycles. And I will see you next time. See you later.